Good morning, everybody. This is Tanya from the Creativerie. Today we're going to do the Monstera Leaf Embroidery Kit that is exclusively available through For Good Vibes. I will link their Instagram and their website down below. Now, with everything going on with the coronavirus, I am not sure what their hours are day to day, so it's best to check out their website and or their Instagram and Facebook for updates. Otherwise, the difference between what you can get from them and what you can get from me is they have the Monstera Leaf Embroidery Kit that are made and everything is ready to go. Everything is included in this kit. If you can't get to a kit or you're not in Massachusetts, in Medford, Massachusetts, you can download the pattern and follow the instructions, but you have to have your own supplies, meaning you have to have your own hoop, needle, thread, etc. So let's get started. So what comes in the kit that's available through For Good Vibes? This is a picture of the product. I have two examples here. We're going to do, today what I'm going to do is, and this is kind of like what I did in the third video when we were talking about stitches. I did half of the Monstera with the back stitch and the other half with Satin Stitch. I'm going to do the same thing today, and we're going to completely cover it, and then we're going to finish the hoop off in the back. Sometimes I teach, when I'm doing a workshop and I have limited time, I teach with this gathered fashion, like a drawstring bag, and we close it up and call it a day because we don't have time to, finish it off with glue and felt, etc. But today I am going to finish off my piece with felt and with glue, and not this gathered back. So these are the examples, and we're going to do one hoop with both versions, one on each side. So let's get started. What comes in the kit? Just real quickly, you get instructions, you have a hoop, you have thread that matches, and then you have the rest of the thread that you need to finish it off. The needle is already threaded for you, and the thread is already separated into 3. And then what you get in here is what actually comes off of a skein of thread. You can see I'm using part of mine here. There's more than enough to finish your project. And I just took it off and I wrapped it around just because I was able to get a couple out of each for a kit. So you'll have to separate that into 3. I would not recommend taking the whole, this is probably about 3 or 4 yards worth of thread. I wouldn't separate it all at once. I would cut it out to like 36-40 inches and then separate it, and now you have 2. I wouldn't do the whole thing at once, but you're free to do so, as I always encourage imagination. And then this one's already ready for you to go. So literally you can take this kit, open it up, open the instructions, and start sewing. So that's what's in the kit. All right, so I already have everything I need to get started. I've already got my needle threaded. I have a knot at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, if you have not taken a moment to watch the first 3 videos about materials you need for embroidery or stitches and prepping your hoop, etc., I highly encourage you to do so. Obviously, you can pause this and come back to this video, but we're going to go ahead and get started in the essence of time. Now, I have some threads ready to go so that when we're sewing here, I don't have to stop and cut, and hopefully I have enough. So the last couple days I've tried to record this video, and I have to tell you, it's been extremely hectic for no reason other than life gets in the way of things. My dogs were exceptionally barky yesterday. They were naughty. My cats were meowing. They were very needy. My husband had stuff he was doing, and it just was very frustrating yesterday. So I gave up yesterday and decided I would do this morning. So what I'm doing here is the back stitch. I started in one area, came up, I went down, and then I came up about, about 1/8 of an inch to the left and went back down into the hole I just left. So we're doing that again. So here we have, remember, a back stitch. You come up and then you go down, you come up and you go down, and you're working your way backwards. Really, it could be a forward stitch. We're working forward, we're working backward, either or. All right. Sometimes I can't see with my glasses on, sometimes I can't see with my glasses off. Today is one of those days where no glasses needed. So what I'm doing is I am just merely outlining the Monstera. And I'm trying to keep my stitches all the same. You know, there's no really right way or wrong way to start a pattern. In my mind, when I'm doing a piece, I look at the most logical place to start. Sometimes it's the obvious, sometimes it's not. And what I mean by that is if I was doing the satin stitch, I would not have started right here. I would have come down about 1/4 of an inch or 1/8 of an inch and started from here and go across, and then I would finish it off, everything to the right of it, and then I'd work my way down. And that just helps, so that makes a nice clean satin stitch up to the top versus starting at the top and working your way down. It makes the top part be a little wonky. You'll see that when we move over to this side and do the satin stitch. Knock on wood, it's unbelievably quiet in my house right now. Sometimes I feel by afternoon my dogs and my cats, first of all, they're tired of us being home. Their routines are off. My routines are off. You always have to keep your hoop tight. You have to do that because if it gets loose, then the knots, I'm sorry, not the knots, but the stitches don't lay nice and flat and even. So this kit is available, like I said, through 4 Good Vibes in Medford, Massachusetts. It's 4 sisters who own 2 gift shops, and they feature, I believe, a couple hundred artists in one shop and maybe about 150 in another. I also teach live classes there. These videos don't replace those live classes because we do completely different techniques and patterns in the classes. I highly recommend if you're interested. We had to cancel everything right now for March. Not sure what's coming up, but I didn't have anything coming up until late April, so I'm not sure what we'll keep and what will change. So you can always look at their website. Again, I will link them into the description of this video, so in case you want to check them out. If you're not in Medford, if you're not in Massachusetts, in the Boston area, I believe they ship as well. But these 4 sisters have 2 gift shops. I teach 1 to 2 times a month, just depending on the schedule that I keep and the schedule that they keep. And they have lots of other great workshops. I'm not the only person teaching workshops. They do an array of stuff. The chunky blankets is actually very popular, if you've seen those. They even have sewing classes, painting classes, jewelry making classes, which look really awesome, soap making classes. So I highly encourage you to check them out. So I'm just continuing to follow an outline. I apologize if you can hear my dog whining in the background, which was exactly what I was trying to avoid today. If you have any ideas of something you'd like to see embroidered and turned into a pattern in a video, leave a note in the descriptions. I'd love to hear from you. I'm sorry, leave a note in the comment section. So again, I'm just outlining the left side of this Monstera. One thing thing to keep in mind too is as I sit here, my hands get a little crampy from staying in the same position. You have to sometimes remember that you have to stretch out your fingers and your wrists and your arms just to keep them going. Getting stiff is not worth being in pain for. So make sure that you're stretching out your arms and your wrists and your fingers. Sometimes after I've sat here for a few minutes, I get kind of crampy for holding on to this. All right. Like I said, I've tried to make this video a couple times and they were just really unsuccessful and I was frustrated. But you know what? I'm just going to embrace the imperfection. This is life, people. There's no fancy studio. I'm sitting here in my desk in my office at home with a little setup for video and recording. And my goal is to make these and not have to do a lot of editing. I'm married to a video editor. He does all kinds of that stuff, but I don't want to take up his time to have to edit video. All right. So it looks like my one big long strand. And the reason why I say 36 inches is that's just a yardstick. Is you don't want to have a really long piece of thread that you can't manage. You know, you don't want to be sewing and having to keep moving your arm and your shoulder to pull string through. But you also don't want it so short that you can't get anything done because you're constantly rethreading your needle all the time. So that yardstick, 36 to 40 inches or so is a good length. Because remember, you're going to divide that in half when you split your threads. Looks like I'm going to make it right to the end with this here, which is great. Whoops. This actually might turn out kind of cool with half of it being outlined and half of it being satin stitch on the other side. There's nothing wrong with anything creative that we do with this pattern. It's all open to your imagination. All right, I'm coming up to the end here. All right, so I have finished the left side with an outline. The back looks as cool as the front. Actually, I like the back a lot. What we're going to do here is tie this off in the back, and then we're going to do a satin stitch on the right side. And then in the end, we'll finish off this hoop. So what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to cut my needle off. Now I always put my needle on a magnet, and this is just an upside down magnet because I always lose them, and with puppies in the house I don't want them to pick them up off the floor. So I'm going to tie this into a sneaker knot. I call it the sneaker knot because it's like tying your shoes in a knot. It was the best I came up with at the time. So I just tie that twice, and that's good enough. Actually, I might have done that 3 times. We're going to snip it at the end and get rid of these little pieces. Okay, so here we have half of it done. Back stitch on the left side. We're going to do the satin stitch next. Okay, so as we start to get ready for the second half, we're going to do a satin stitch. I put stitching guidelines in here because I will cover them. They were probably on this one too, but as you can tell that this is more of like a 10-degree angle, and then it starts to get up closer to like a 45-degree angle. We do that in embroidery to give dimension and texture to your piece. If everything went the same direction, it would look very flat. You can look at this and you can see everything kind of goes the same way and it looks a little flat. So I'm going to start, I would have started here if I had thread left over from doing the outline, but because I actually tied it off in the back, I'm going to start up here. Now the reason why I start in the middle and not right there is because I want to set the stage for the right thread direction. So I want to go at about a 45-degree angle. You can see that this is parallel, so I'll go straight down. Oops. See if I can find that hole again. There it is. I use my thread as a guide to make sure it was parallel. And now I kind of have a pattern to follow, and so I'll go up and I'll work my way up, and then I'll go work my way down. This should only take a couple stitches, and then this will be done on this side up here on top. And there we go. See how I finished the top off up there? Now you can do one of two things. You can either come up here and go down here, or you can come up here and go down here. I alternate sometimes, depending. I really want a nice straight line here. And to get that nice straight line, I typically will end my stitch here. So I'm actually going to come up on the leaf. I'll show you both ways. Starting at the top and going down in the middle often will create, I'm trying to avoid the knot. As I'm trying to come through, it's trying to grab that knot, and I don't want to go through that. So I'm just taking my finger and I'm holding it over. There we go. There we go. I often find that wherever I'm going down in my needle, it's got the neatest and most straight lines. When I'm coming up from the middle and going over here, I would find that this would be more perfect. I don't know what it is. And here I have a knot. I give knots about 30 seconds. If I can't get them out in about 30 seconds, I cut it and I start over. But because I noticed this one quickly, I can actually get it out. There we go. My rule of thumb, 30 seconds, I'll work on a knot. If I can't get it out, cut it out, keep going. So as we get down to the second Monstera, I don't know, whatever part of this leaf here, I want to start working my needle in a different direction so that we're coming off a 45-degree angle, and now we're working at maybe like a 30, 20, 10. So how I do that is I kind of start spacing out a little over here on the side. I won't make it as perfect. I spread out how I'm coming off the leaf here on the outline. We don't want to leave spaces, but you have to make an adjustment somewhere to create the change. So you can see I'm starting to come a little bit down. So I'll keep that angle for a little while. See how perfectly nice that line is? And it's okay if it's rigid out here a little bit. It's a leaf. It's totally fine. I'm going to keep going until I finish up this little elbow area. And what I'm going to do is I'm now going to come, I feel like I kind of need to come in from the middle to set how I'm going to sew out here. Because there's going to be spaces where we don't want thread, okay, you can bounce around and meet yourself back up, and it's like coloring. You can start on the outside and you can work your way in. You can jump around a little bit and catch up. There's no really right or wrong way. It's just logic. It's just logic on where you think logistically you should start, finish, and fill in. So that one was a little tricky there, but let's see what it looks like. Worst case scenario, we have to take it out. So I'm in between the leaf part there. I'm not near the elbow. I do have to create this open space here. So now I'll come up above it and fill it in. Perfect. Now, I really don't have anywhere to come in from the middle anymore. So now I want to come in right about there, because that shows and we'll finish off this leaf here. Always remember, in embroidery, you're painting with thread. If you don't like how something looks, go ahead and cut it out and start over. If I were to have made mistakes and I go back and try to go over it, it might create some threads that are a little thicker than others, and it might look a little different. I tend to just cut my losses and pull out the stitches. Alright, so we have 2 full ones done, and we're working on this next one. And as you notice, we're starting to move down a little bit in our direction of the stitches, so that we're working our way down to about a 10-20 degree angle. If you notice how nice and neat these were when I was coming up and going down here, now you notice I'm coming up here and I'm going down over here, and the outside over here looks a little better. And that's fine, no big deal. So I'm getting down to a really close 4 to 5 inches left. Thread is cheap, I just cut it off. I don't save it. I did have a magnet here. I use a magnet because I lose my needles all the time. And they roll on the floor, and then my puppy picks it up. All right. So far we're looking good. So I already made sure that all my threads were already separated and ready to needle my thread, thread my needle, needle my thread, whichever. There we go. All right. We're ready to go. So we're just picking up where we left off. And I'm actually going to go back to the outside and come back in to the middle. And then I can come in and fill that in. It's actually pretty good. I'm going to fill it in with one more. And rather than going straight down in here, I'm going to guide my needle through that. So I came pretty close right here. That's okay. I'm going to go down right before the middle. And you can see in the back I went right through that knot so as to not pull any threads through. Keeping my finger there. Sometimes it is inevitable. And it laid down perfectly flat. You don't even notice. Alright, we'll keep going. So now we're at the elbow again. Now we are working our way down to getting to another, and I think if I just keep on going, I'm gonna match that angle. If you feel like you can't, you can always come up in the middle. Just do it. And create your angle. And then fill it in. Your loss is about an extra inch of thread by going down in the back. The other day I was trying to do a video and someone's car alarm kept going off. That was Monday. It would go off, it'd go about 10 minutes, it'd go back on, it'd go off, it kept going on and on and on. Like I said in my Instagram post this morning, it's just been a couple hectic days. Actually, it's been more than a couple hectic days, but here at my house it's been hectic. Alright, so I do notice that I have a little part of that leaf up there. And I'll just come in right there on the edge. And probably only going to need one stitch there. Perfect. Now, I don't need to like thread my needle in the back to go down, because I'm not crossing over like over to here. I'm going, oh, and if you see what I did here, I accidentally sewed into the side, which is why I always keep this cut short. But it's totally fine. This is what you do to fix it. If you can, cut around it. As long as you have enough here that it wouldn't matter when you sew it in, I just cut around it and leave it. No big deal. Actually, I probably could cut it out, but because I did it twice, I'm going to leave it alone. No big deal. You don't even notice. All right. So now what I was saying is I didn't need to hide the thread underneath in the back because it wasn't going to show anyways. There you go. We're almost done, and I'm not sure if I'll make it with this amount of thread. I may have to thread another needle. The only time that I would be apt to saving thread would be if this was the last piece I had of this color and I can't go to the store to buy more. I would be coming up here, go down, and then it would come up right next to it and go down and hopefully make it all the way through. But I do have more thread, and I'm not going to do that here, but I do think that I might as well just cut it off and start a new one. It's no big deal. This fabric, I want to say, is by a brand name at Joann's called Kona. And to be honest with you, even though it's 100% cotton, it's a little stretchy, so it does get loose. You just have to make sure that you're giving it a tight pull. Remember, snare drum, tightening up your screw if you can. I have used pliers to tighten these, and I've broken them. So you never want to go too tight, but sometimes if you don't have a lot of strength in your hand to tighten them, you know, using a pliers, or you can actually make them a little tighter, but don't go too far because they will snap off. All right, so let's just thread one more since I have it ready. Okay. All right. Okay, I think we need one more here. All right. And that finishes off the other side. Now, we did have a stem here, in which I do want to make sure gets in there. So what I'm going to do is this. Now I'll show you how I really need a thread to go back up to the top, because I want to go from the top to the bottom. This is a tiny hoop. Usually I'm used to working with 6, 7, 8-inch hoops. And I can't get the needle to rock underneath there, so I just have to kind of go from side to side and catch it, just to hide it. Whenever I'm doing outlining, and I can show some examples of projects I've done where it's just an outline, you never ever want to have threads going across the back, because then you can see that. Of course, it depends. If you're using black fabric, it's one thing and you wouldn't see it, but if you're using white, you can see through that, and I just don't like ghost threads. So I've kind of just weaved my thread up a couple just to secure it a little bit. And that's not where I wanted to come up at. I want to come up right about there. So now we're going to do modified couching. And modified couching, if you've watched the third video, is where we're going to lay the thread down, okay, and then we're going to come back up and we're going to go over the top of it. And I'm only going to make probably about 3. So I know that I want to come down right here, just because this curls a little bit and I don't want there to be couching on the tail. So when you come down, you pull, you notice that it kind of goes over one and it comes over to the other side, and that's okay. So what we're going to do is I'm going to use my thumb. You don't want that to be loose. You do want it to be tight, otherwise it comes up a little bit. However, you do have to bring your needle up at some point 2/3 of the way or 1/3 of the way. So what I do is I use my thumb and I separate it a little bit and I brought my needle up. However, I'm going to pull this tight again from the back so that's nice and tight. I pulled my needle through and I'm going to go back down in the same hole that my needle came up at. If it's not the same hole, it's totally fine. And now you can see that that helps that lay down flat. We're going to do it again. And then I came up on the other side this time, and I can use my needle to kind of move it over a little bit. And there you have modified couching. You can do more if you like to add more texture. Modified couching is not one of my favorite stitches, but it serves its purpose when you need to. Like outlining, couching is good on an outline. Now I'm going to come back down here and finish off this one. There we go. So I'm actually going to cut this off and tie a knot. Now in my kit, I don't put black pearl cotton for outlining. This particular pattern wasn't meant to have an outline done on it, just because it was a shorter timed workshop. But I would like to show you what it looks like to have an outline before we finish. So we talked about thread in one of the videos, and I use pearl cotton. Sorry, one of mine is, I can't reach it, but I have it. Nope, I do need it. The larger the number, the smaller the thread. I mark them on the inside because once this pops out, this is just like a little piece of paper in there. Once it pops out, I can look at thread and say, oh yeah, that looks like number 12, because I know that it's thinner than the 8. I actually mark on the inside of my threads here what number it is, not the color. I only use black. I've never purchased any other colors, but I think we should outline this with a 12 because it's a lot thinner versus the 8, which is a little thicker. And if you can see that on my finger there. I won't pull from the new one. So you can just pull off probably like 20 inches or so. That's actually too much, but we're not going to double this over. Thread our needle. But we do have to put a knot in the back. So this is just like a single thread. This is what you would do if you were sewing back in the day, like maybe a button on your shirt or something. So we keep it single. It doesn't need to be doubled up. We start in one place. I'm just going to outline one side, so I'll outline the side with the satin stitch. What I'm actually going to do is a back stitch all the way around. And you can see where I grab that knot, and I don't want to do that. So I'll get that off. So I've pulled that through. And I'm going to take little stitches all the way around. Because this has some round elements to it, we don't want to take long stitches, otherwise it looks kind of choppy. We want to take very small stitches, just like we did over on this side, to just outline. I wouldn't outline an outline like over here. There's no point to it, because you already have the contrast of the thread and the fabric. But over here, where we do have a knot in my way. Here we go. The outlining gives it another layer of dimension. I don't always outline everything. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It kind of depends on how the piece comes together. But this kit does not include the pearl cotton black outline. If you have black thread that's in a skein, it's number 310. That looks like this, but it's black. The number down here on the bottom would say 310, and that's black. You can separate them into 3, but I wouldn't double it over. I would just, you can separate it into 3 like I did here with this green, and then just like I'm doing with the black, you do a single, and tie a knot at the end. See, the piece is starting to take a different look with the black around it. Like I said, outlining is a preference. Some people like to not have... Now see, I don't like where that landed, so I'm actually going to pull that out. Which means, and don't be discouraged by this, but you actually have to take thread right out of the needle for that and probably snip the edge because it does fray a little bit. There we go. I didn't like where that had landed. You know, and just one little tiny mess up like that, you can notice it. I always notice it. That's right where I don't want to look back at a piece that I spent a ton of time on and see that mistake. And it was just where I missed there was just a little bit too much space is all that really was. I keep going into this elbow here because I know there's some separation there. And I want to give that little bit of separation some definition. So I brought one in there, but I'm not going to go back in twice for the others, for the top. So like I was following the bottom, but I'm not going to go back in there for the top of this one. I'll just meet it. And again, you can see where it's there. All right, so we're coming up to the end here. just about done. Okay, coming around. So modified couching and outlining merely is kind of doing the same thing, only I'm taking shorter stitches to go around, where what you would do is you would actually come up at one point and you could actually come up over here, and then you modify, you couch it in along the way. I tend to think that that looks not great when you're going around something, but sometimes it does. So I guess it's just kind of a preference. You have to like find out on your own what you like and what you don't. Again, this is what you make of it. You know, you don't have to stitch like I do. You don't have to stitch like other people do. Once you get a skill for it, you tend to find your likes and dislikes and how you like to do things, and there's nothing wrong with that. Okay. So I have finished going around that. If this was all satin stitch, I'd go all the way around the whole thing. I'd even go around the stem here on the outside, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not really sure what that might look like if I try to go down the middle. Actually, I kind of like that. So I'm going to go back up. And I'm going to go down. Now, I am not going to outline the bottom part of this. I'm going to tell you why. One line is going to give it everything it needs. However, when I come up, here, and I lay this down, this is just like a spur of the moment thing I'm doing here. I want to couch it exactly as close as I can to where I did it. Now I'm coming up on the left hand side of this. I'm just trying to find a spot to come up because there's knots back here. I'm going to come up. I can grab this carefully with my needle, and I can go right down where I came up at. And this is what a longer, I want that to be on the outside. There you have it. And then on this side, I'll come up. Again, I'll come up on the right side and tuck it in on the left. And there you go. Okay, so now you might ask, how do we tie this into a sneaker knot when you only got one? You can do one of two things. Hopefully you can see this, and I'll do this in other videos, but it's like doing a French knot when you want to tie a knot in the back where you don't, because what I would do is I would just double this underneath and create 2 strings and tie it and be done with it. But traditional knots in the back of your embroidery is merely like doing a French knot, but you're actually going to pull your needle through. You pull, 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 right? Stick your fingernail down on it and slightly pull, and now you have a knot. Let me show that to you again. It's really hard to show when the lighting stinks and it's not close up. Okay, now let's just say I didn't do that and I want to create a way to do my famous little sneaker knot here. So I would just go up underneath there somewhere, pull my needle out, and just create 2 strings and tie a knot. Just like so. There you go. Okay. So there we have the back side, and here we have the front. Now how we're going to finish this is, I am pretty sure we need a piece of felt here, because I'm afraid if once we glue this, you might still see it, but maybe not. Whenever you're working with white material and you tuck this under to glue it, the glue isn't going to come on to your piece here. It's going to merely be put on the inside a little bit, and you're going to tuck and squeeze until you go all the way around, and then you're going to leave it to dry for about 15-20 minutes and it's ready. Sometimes you can see through the material and you can see where those edges lie, and I don't really like that, which is why I use felt. And so this felt is meant for a 4-inch, but that's not a big deal. I keep templates of all of the sizes of on cardboard, cardstock, watercolor paper. I make templates of each size so that if at the end I didn't actually trace that out in the beginning, I actually have it. So I just take out a pen that works and I just trace around it. Now with my scissors, I just trace it. It doesn't need to be super perfect. In fact, a lot of times it might be a little too big, but I cut it around. I always leave the ink side up just in case. Actually, it fits in there pretty perfectly. All right. So we have a 3-inch circle. Now, this is the glue that I use, tacky glue. Somehow I must have broke the cap to this one, so it's taped. There we go. These bottles last. This is a 4-ounce bottle. I will bet you that I've had that other one for probably 3 or 4 years. It really does last forever. Because it's very, very thick glue, it takes a bit to hold it upside down. But I actually want to go back and look at this. Well, while we're doing that, when you're gluing in the back of anything, if this was all outlined, I'd be extremely careful as to how much glue you use. It might be better to put it on a piece of paper and then maybe use a toothpick or a Q-tip to put a little bit on the top of the thread there. But if you start to put it all over the place, it's going to seep through and you'll see it. So I know that on this part, it's not going to seep through. Now, if you're careful enough, you can put a little on the tips just for it to lie down on. But I would just want to be careful not to get it on the fabric. This is just merely so that there's no light shine to come through. So I'm not going to do much more than just press it down. It'll dry, it'll hold. But one thing I wanted to make sure I looked at was, do I have too much fabric back here to glue down? And I sort of do. So I want to cut that down a little bit. You do not have to use a pinking shears for this. A regular scissors will do. So as you can see, I just cut down a little bit because it will fit. And it'll look nice. So now what we're going to do with this glue is we're going to put a little bit of glue on the edge. You can put some on the inside here too, little bit. If you feel more comfortable putting a dot of glue on a piece of paper and then using a paintbrush, you can do that too. But you really don't need a lot of glue. This stuff goes a long way. As long as nobody monkeys with the back, it'll be okay. So now what we do is we just tuck and pinch, and it will pop back up. Tuck and pinch. tuck and pinch, do it again, and again. This holds really well. And just keep doing that. Make sure if you're working with white material and you're rubbing around on your desk that your desk is clean, it'll pick up every piece of dirt. Just, you know, like rubbing it in. That looks pretty darn nice. And there you have a hoop that looks a little different, you know, side-by-side comparison, and you're done. So I would totally love to see your creations. If you post it on Instagram, please tag me at the creativerie, or you can hashtag DIY the creativerie. I would love to see your work. I love to see what other people do and what they use their imagination and change things up. That's the best part. All right, looking forward to another video, and thank you for tuning in.